Good evening, everyone. It's 5:09 p.m. and I'm calling together to order the May 11th City Council meeting. Before I start the meeting, I'd like to read a disclosure, and it is the health and well-being of the City of Chula Vista residents during the COVID-19 outbreak remains our top priority. Out of an abundance of caution and in accordance with the state guidelines issued regarding the COVID-19 outbreak, the City of Chula Vista has modified its operations. During tonight's council meeting, the city is offering the option for attendees to provide live public comment in addition to e-comment. Those wishing to provide public comments in person are required to wear masks and follow posted social distancing guidelines. If you would like to make a live public comment, please register with the city clerk's staff in the main City Hall lobby, if you have not already done so. To provide comments remotely on the city's virtual commenting portal, e-comment, please visit www.chulavista.gov/cityclerk, and your comments must be received before I call for the close of the commenting period in order to be considered. After the commenting period is closed, I will announce a brief pause to allow the council members time to read any comments that have been received. If you have any difficulty or need assistance with e-comment during the meeting, please call area code 619-691-5041 and the city clerk staff will assist you. Tonight's meeting will also be streamed on the city's YouTube channel, and in addition to our regular streaming service, viewers can use YouTube to display closed caption and switch the text to Spanish or other languages. To access the meeting via YouTube, please visit chulavistaca.gov/YouTube. And Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Cardenas? Present. Councilmember Galvez?
Present.
Councilmember McCann?
Present.
Councilmember Padilla?
Present.
And Mayor Casillas-Salas.
Present. Just one more announcement. Each council member and I will receive $50 for our attendance at this Housing Authority meeting being held simultaneously with the City Council meeting. Thank you. And with that, can you all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? And before I begin the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for 4-year-old Joshua and 5-year-old Gabrielle Suro, who died in a tragic house fire on Coralville Court on Thursday, May the 7th. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and you may be seated. So today, under special orders of the day, we do have an update, a COVID-19 update by our City of Chula Vista Emergency Services Coordinator, Marlon King. Well, welcome, Marlon.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Good evening, council members. I hope everyone's doing well this evening. Tonight's EOC update on COVID-19. 14 months in, we are still currently in the orange tier. Nationwide, we are seeing the lowest number of cases we've seen since September. So things are looking good on the COVID front, right? We're making a lot of progress with the vaccines. All of the public health measures that we've implemented is finally starting to pay off, so things are looking better. In California, cases are holding steady. California has the second lowest rate of spread in the nation. In San Diego, we continue to fluctuate between the mid-100 and mid-200 on cases per day. We would like to see these numbers continue at a steady decline week after week, but we still have a ways to go before we get there. But for now, we remain in the orange tier, as we spoke of last week. A lot of indoor capacities have been increased in that orange tier, but there are still some limitations with those sectors. All orange tier restrictions can be found on our City of Chula Vista COVID website or the county webpage. Next slide, please. As far as vaccination progress, there has been a drastic slowing on the number of vaccinations per day in the county, but the efforts to vaccinate people remain strong. As you see in the slide, we're about 62.5% of our goal to vaccinate the eligible population. This number will change over the next few days with the announcement made by the FDA today or yesterday to open the vaccine to more individuals, and we'll speak more about that in a little bit. But you can see there, again, 86% of San Diego residents or eligible residents have at least one dose of the vaccine. 62.5% of the eligible population has been fully vaccinated. Next slide. Operation Immunity, our mobile vaccine unit through the Chula Vista Fire Department, continues to be a resource to the community. We've been fortunate enough to support various groups with helping their target populations get vaccinated. We've gone to senior living communities such as Congregational Tower, Garden Villas, Volta, Town Center Manor, Via Serena, Harvest Ridge, Rolling Hills Ranch. We've also visited senior mobile home parks, many of them down in the southwest area of Chula Vista, including Orange Tree Mobile Home Park, Continental Country Club, Terry's Mobile Home, Cabrillo, Palace Gardens, among others. Next slide. We've also conducted large-scale vaccination events for the general population in our community with no appointment necessary, making it easier for residents to have access to the vaccine. We continue to host pop-up events both here at City Hall, right here in Council Chambers, and at the Civic Center Library. We try to announce those on our social media websites and get them out through our partners in the community just to let folks know that vaccine is available. Next slide. We've also helped different business sectors vaccinate their employees, including food and agriculture, public utilities, and even the school district. Just today, we did an event at Castle Park High School where they invited their students and the surrounding high schools here on the west side to come and get vaccine. We've given vaccines in break rooms, freezers, storage closets, and even curbside right next to our vehicle. We're going out of our way just to get vaccine to anybody we can, anywhere that we can. Next slide. Lastly, we've gone into areas to reach our homeless and transient populations. Through our homebound outreach, we've conducted more than 140 homebound vaccination. Each event, residents are overwhelmingly appreciative of having the vaccine brought to them in such a convenient way. We've received many letters of just gratitude and thanks for everything that our fire department has done and frankly, the city has done to help individuals get through this pandemic. Operation Immunity has been a success, and our goal is to continue vaccinating anyone who wishes to receive the vaccine. So through Operation Immunity, we've completed over 9,300 vaccines. This does not include the countless number of vaccination appointments made by our library and human resources staff, who've collectively spent hundreds of hours connecting residents with vaccine appointments early on when vaccines were available. Next slide. So what's next? The FDA has just announced the approval of the Pfizer vaccine for ages 12 and older. We are still waiting on the state to announce the approval here within the state of California. We expect that announcement to be made tomorrow, and we will be prepared as early as Thursday to start administering vaccine to ages 12 and older. We've been coordinating with the Sweetwater Union High School District and the Chula Vista Elementary School District to help vaccinate students and their families. We like it to be a family affair. We have the Pfizer vaccine able for those that are now going to be 12 and older, and then if the parents or anybody wants a different vaccine, Johnson & Johnson or Moderna, we have those available as well. So we like to make it a one-stop shop so that parents can just bring their kids and the entire family can get vaccinated in one place. Of note, again, vaccines are readily available all throughout the county. Almost every site now is accepting walk-ins. You can visit Vaccination Superstation SD to find a vaccine clinic nearest you and also figure out what brand of vaccine they have at that location. So we're making it more convenient for everyone in the county to receive vaccine. Next slide. Moving forward, these COVID-19 updates will be provided at the first council meeting of the month. Any new information related to policies or guidelines will be presented as needed, so will still be available, but our general COVID-19 updates will be reserved for the first council meeting of the month. Looking forward, I know we're all looking at the June 15th beyond the blueprint, and that's the return to normal operations. Again, that's when we expect that all of these restrictions will be lifted and business can go back to the days pre-COVID. There are going to be some minor think stipulations in place such as maxing out larger events at 5,000 or something like that. But for the most part, life will be resuming back to normal pre-COVID status. Lastly, we just ask that everyone continue to mask up, get vaccinated, wash your hands, and practice safe and hygienic health practices. And that is the COVID-19 update for today. I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Marlon, and thank you for reminding us to mask up because it's so easy to let your guard down. And certainly one of the jobs of the mayor and the city council are to be modeling good behavior. So, we need to keep those masks on. Ms. Galvez, you have your speaker button on.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much, Marlon, and Operational Immunity. This is such a tremendous gift to our city. Could you tell us more about, can you tell us more about how that will roll out in the school districts, and if parents sign waivers or the children must be accompanied? Is there a breakdown in ages? How will that play out for 12 to 15 and then 15 and older?
Certainly. So we go by a simple waiver. There's a San Diego immunization registry form that anyone under the age of 18 must have a parent signature. If they complete the registration form online with their parent, then there is no need to have the parent present because they can submit, they made an appointment online, therefore they signed the waiver online, so there's no need to have a parent present at the time. If it is a no appointment site where they just walk up, then a parent has to be there to provide a physical signature the day of their vaccine. Working with the school districts, they've been able to set up their own appointment-based system for the students at the schools that are coming through. So the staff on site are monitoring whether or not the person registered online and that parent's signature was provided then, or if they come without an appointment, then they walk up with their parent and have the signature then at that time. As far as the rollout to the schools, we're working directly with the school district. They select the school site. They select the schools that are being invited to that location for that vaccine. So as of today, when we did Castle Park, the school district invited the West Side schools to that location. On Thursday, we'll be going out to Eastlake High School. The surrounding schools, Bonita, Otay Ranch, Olympian, will all be invited to Eastlake High School to receive that vaccine. Now, in the event that the announcement is made for ages 12 and older, then the middle schools in that area will be invited to there.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Marlon? Okay, thank you very much for the update.
Thank you.
With that, we'll go to item number B, and that's a presentation of a proclamation proclaiming Monday, May the 10th, 2021, as World Lupus Day in Chula Vista, and accepting the proclamation is the Ricardo Becerra, President of the Lupus Foundation of Southern California. Are you here, Ricardo? Yes, and then Elizabeth Savage, who is the Executive Director. Please welcome to the dais. You may take your mask off when you're speaking. And Miss Andrea, Councilwoman Cardenas, will give the proclamation to you as I read it. Whereas World Lupus Day was first celebrated in 2004 when an international steering committee representing lupus organizations from 13 different nations met in Eton, United Kingdom. And whereas lupus is a chronic autoimmune disease where antibiotics are directed against self, causing inflammation of various parts of the body, especially the skin, joints, blood, and kidneys. And whereas lupus research data shows that about 2 million people have been diagnosed with lupus, affecting 1 out of every 185 Americans, and striking adult women 10 to 15 times more frequently than adult men. Whereas although lupus is not infectious, rare, or cancerous, more people have lupus than AIDS, cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, sickle cell anemia, and cystic fibrosis combined. And while lupus ranges from mild to life-threatening, and thousands of Americans die with lupus each year, the majority of the cases can be controlled with proper treatment. And whereas Lupus Foundation of Southern California is a 501c3 nonprofit health agency serving San Diego and Imperial counties by providing self-help oriented groups, peer-patient counseling, and disseminating lupus literature, speakers bureau, and participating in community health fairs throughout San Diego County, and providing health symposiums on issues that confront lupus patients and their families. Now therefore, I, Mary Casillas Salas, the 40th Mayor of the City of Chula Vista, together with the City Council, do hereby proclaim May 10th as World Lupus Day in the City of Chula Vista. Thank you for the work that you do. And Ms. Cardenas does have the proclamation for you. Ms. Cardenas, if you want to stay there for a photo.
Oh, great.
I don't know if you have someone from your organization taking a photo.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, City Council members. Thank you for all the years that you have supported our organization. We have been here since 1976, helping with local lupus patients and being advocates for them. And we also donate money for research, much-needed research. And thank you for providing so many wonderful facts about lupus, because not that they're wonderful, but that people don't really understand that it takes on average 6 years to get diagnosed with lupus, because it attacks so many different areas of the body, and it's very different in each individual. So we really appreciate that you're bringing awareness to this terrible disease. And I know you're very busy, the COVID, outbreak, but this is something that's very important to so many people, and we really appreciate your time and effort in this. Thank you. And I also wanted to have Gerardo Becerra speak. He's the president of our organization and also a lupus patient.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name's Gerardo Becerra, president of the organization, a volunteer, and a resident of Chula Vista for 43 years. So my roots are here in Chula Vista. I just want to say thank you, just like Elizabeth did, for recognizing our organization. There's approximately 1.5 to 2 million lupus patients diagnosed in the U.S. That means there's other patients that have not been diagnosed. In the world, approximately 5 million diagnosed lupus patients. We're here, we provide many services to the lupus community, and I want to just say thank you very much. Appreciate your support, and have a good evening.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here and for advocating and passing the word along about lupus and the serious effects that it has. I know we had an employee here many years ago that worked in our public works department that suffered from lupus, and she eventually passed on. So it's really important to us as a Chula Vista family as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
So our next presentation, I'm going to ask Councilwoman Jill Galvez to step down. And this is a presentation of a proclamation proclaiming the week of April the 17th through April the 24th. I know we're a little late, as annual Native Plant Earth Week in the city of Chula Vista. And accepting the proclamation is Adrian Ramirez, who's the plant plant coordinator, restoration assistant. And then virtually, Andrew Meyer, director of conservation, Christina Santa Maria, and the conservation committee member and OVRP Citizen Advisory Committee member. So I will read the proclamation. Whereas the city of Chula Vista benefits from being on the Pacific Flyway, a diverse chain of habitats from the Arctic tundra to the tropical beaches, and a major migratory route for birds that need native plants for shelter, nectar, pollen, and seeds. Whereas the city of Chula Vista has abundant bird life, with San Diego County recording over 492 different bird species, including warblers, geese, owls, and the endangered least-bell's viro, California least tern, and the Ridgway rail. And whereas preserving native plant ecosystems in Chula Vista is critical for protecting water quality and wildlife, including pollinators such as birds and monarch butterflies, and our park and communities can provide critical space to combat climate change, invasive species, and habitat loss, whereas our natural resources with our diverse population, whereas supporting native plantings in the Otay Valley Regional Park works to further the goals of the OVRP concept plan and the open space preserve policies and goals, number 1 and number 2 of the OVRP habitat restoration and non-native plant removal guidelines. Now therefore, I, Mary Casillas Salas, 40th Mayor of the City of Chula Vista, together with the City Council, do hereby proclaim April the 17th through April the 24th as annual Native Plant Earth Week in the City of Chula Vista, and encourage our residents to make every effort to use native plants in their gardens. And thank you. And I asked Ms. Galvez to make the presentation because if you go to her garden, it's nothing but native plants and it's absolutely beautiful. She's got all kinds of animals living in her garden.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Casillas Salas and board members. A really quick speech. My name is Adrian. I'm an engineer student at San Diego. And I have with me Professor Chaddock. She's also a board member from the San Diego Audubon Society. She's actually the one that reeled me in and stuff. She's like, I joined Audubon Society. It's great for your fit. I'm like, okay, cool. So I've been on board with them for like about 2 years now, so I love it. But a couple words. Thank you again. My name is Adrian Ramirez, an engineering student at San Diego City College. I'm also the club treasurer for San Diego City College Audubon Club. As of right now, I am a restoration employee with the San Diego Audubon Society. A little bit about us, we are San Diego Audubon Society. We have been working to protect the birds, wildlife, and their habitats in San Diego since 1948. With this proclamation, Chula Vista and Mary Casillas Salas are acknowledging that cultivating and preserving native plants is critical to so many species, all kinds of birds, monarch butterflies, native bees, and reptiles and mammals. Chula Vista has an abundance of great waterfront and streamside parks, including Otay Valley Regional Park, and we humans benefit from protected open space and diverse parks. We would like to thank you all for this wonderful step forward to a greener environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the work that you do. Professor, did you want to say something?
All right.
Just very quickly, thank you so much for your leadership and your continued support for conservation. You lead the county of San Diego with all that you do. I just can't thank you enough.
You're right. We were the first city to adopt a multiple species conservation plan, so we are very proud of our legacy.
We got you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll go on to the consent calendar, and we do have 8 items on the consent calendar. I have not been asked to pull a consent calendar by any member of the public or the city council members. Madam Clerk, would you please set the timer for 2 minutes while we allow for additional e-comments to come in? Madam Clerk, did we receive any public comments?
No public comments were received, Madam Mayor, and we have no speakers on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I will offer the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Galvez seconds the consent calendar. Madam Clerk, would you read the headings away of the text?
Item 1 is resolution of the City Council of the City of Chula Vista accepting a grant from Community Congregational Development Corporation, CCDC, in the amount of $450,000, amending the fiscal year 2020-2021 CIP program budget by establishing a new CIP project GGV0260, Norman Park Senior Center improvements, and appropriating funds therefore. Four-fifths vote required. Item 2 is resolution of the City Council of the City of Chula Vista authorizing execution of a master communications site license agreement with Crown Castle Towers 06-2 for wireless telecommunications facilities on public property. Item 3 is resolution of the City Council of the City of Chula Vista approving an agreement for pavement conditions assessment and management services between the city and Applied Research Associates Incorporated. Item 4 is resolution of the City Council of the City of Chula Vista approving an easement purchase agreement with Terry Enterprises LLC in the amount of $131,000. Item 5 is resolution of the City Council of the City of Chula Vista awarding a design-build agreement for the design and pre-construction Phase 1, to EC Constructors, Inc. for the renovation of Fire Station 1, CIP number GGV0252. Item 6A is resolution of the City Council of the City of Chula Vista accepting $1 million from the Board of State and Community Corrections, adding one peace officer to the authorized staffing level of the Police Department, and appropriating $48,556 to the fiscal year 2020-2021 Police Grants section of the State Grants Fund for the Proposition 64 Public Health and Safety Grant Program. Four-fifths vote required. Item 6B is resolution of the City Council of the City of Chula Vista approving agreement number BSCC 945-21 with the Board of State Community Corrections for the Proposition 64 Public Health and Safety Grant Program. Item 6C is resolution of the City Council of the City of Chula Vista approving agreements with South Bay Community Services and San Diego Association of Governments for the Proposition 64 Public Health and Safety Grant Program. Item 7 is resolution of the City Council of the City of Chula Vista accepting $53,700 from the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services and appropriating said funds to the Police Grants section of the Federal Grants Fund for the Coverdell Forensic Science Improvement Program. Four-fifths vote required. Item 8 is resolution of the City Council of the City of Chula Vista accepting $203,143 from the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, waiving the consultant selection process, approving the agreement with South Bay Community Services, and appropriating $101,572 to the Police Grants section of the Federal Grants Fund for Domestic Violence Response Team. Four-fifths vote required. End of consent.
Please vote. Okay, and the consent calendar passes unanimously. Thank you very much. With that, we will go on to public comments. And public comments is a section of the city council meeting where any member of the public may address the city council on matters that are within our jurisdiction, but not on tonight's agenda. So Madam Clerk, can you set the timer for 2 minutes so that we can allow for additional public comment?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we do have the timer going. We don't have any e-comments for public comments at this time. We do have one member of the public who has submitted a request to speak when you're ready to do that.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, did we receive any additional comments?
No e-comments were received, Madam Mayor, and we still just have one in-person commenter for this evening.
All right, and will you introduce that speaker?
Yes, Gonzalo Lopez, if you'd like to come up to the lectern.
To the council. My name is Gonzalo Lopez. I'm a resident of Chula Vista, 235 D Street, 91910. I've been a resident since 1986. I'm here today to ask you to consider a resolution to support the Medicare for All Act of 2021, House Resolution 1976, and CalCare Assembly Bill 1400, which will provide free health care for all residents of the state and, of course, the city of Chula Vista and the nation in the case of the congressional bill that has been introduced about a month and a half ago. This is a very important bill that has been in the making for a long time. With the recent pandemic has taught us how unprepared our nation was to face this kind of calamity. And, it's sad to say, but we are, among the industrialized nations, we are the most expensive. Ironically, we have the best medicine and we have the best science, but we don't have, we don't measure up to other nations in terms of making that medicine and that science reach out to our people. So this is the time when we can correct this. This is a wonderful bill that will provide free health care for all recipients. No co-pays, nothing, that will encumber the attention and the preventive maintenance that our society needs. One very important part is that it will free us because we we choose our own doctor. Businesses don't have to have the bureaucracy that is needed to handle all these regulations that are very encumbering. And, according to statistics, if we had a system like this, probably 40% of our people would not have died. And that is very telling. Just imagine if, all your employees in the city would have a free, a free health care system. How much money you could save that you will use for other things. And it's good for business too, because it's calculated that on average, households in the U.S. will get about $11,000 a year that they can invest in whatever they want and invest in the community. And finally, it's the most important thing about this bill is that it's going to build a sense of community. We're going to feel like a country, united, and we'll be, all the anxieties that we have today. And many of them coming because about 67% of all bankruptcies in the country are due to health issues. So this will be a burden lifted off from people that will be of enormous consequences. I thank you for your attention today, and I'm going to leave a sample resolution for your consideration. And thank you for all your service to the community and all the work you've been doing. I was happy to hear the report on the COVID today, and a wonderful job is being done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lopez, and we'll accept your language for the resolution, and we'll talk about it later under council comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
What do I leave?
You can leave it with the city clerk. Thank you so much. So that concludes our public comments for this evening. So we'll move on to our public hearings, and we do have one item under public hearing. It's a biggie. It's the consideration of our budget. So it's the presentation of the city manager's proposed budget for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. And leading off this discussion is Maria Katchdorian, our wonderful city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. It is my pleasure to present to you the City Manager proposed budget for fiscal year 21-22. The budget is once again being submitted balanced without the use of reserves. This budget is built on conservative projections with no proposed layoffs. And that is really nice to have to say, no proposed layoffs. In fact, we are actually proposing to increase the budget in some areas which are in great need of additional support. One thing I did want to point out is the proposed budget does not include the $57.5 million, which we were just confirmed we're going to be receiving under the American Rescue Plan. That will be coming back to council as a separate item once we receive input from the departments and the community. We'll be bringing back a spending plan for council consideration. We do have until December 2024 to spend the funds, which really, when you look at how long some of these projects take, is really not a long time. So we'll be jumping on that as soon as the budget is complete. With that, I am going to turn it over to Ed Prindell, who will present the details of the proposed budget. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just. Perfect, thank you. Good evening, my name is Ed Prindell. I'm the Budget Manager in the Finance Department, and I'll be providing tonight's presentation of the City Manager's Fiscal Year 22 proposed budget along with the Finance Director, Mr. David Bilby, and the Administrative Services Manager in the Engineering Department, Mr. Bob Beeman. Next slide, please. The City of Chula Vista's operating and capital budgets are created in conjunction with City Council, City staff, and City residents. The budget process begins each year with development of the preliminary baseline budget from January through March. Finance staff worked with departments to refine the baseline budgets, incorporate departmental requests, and other changes to align the budgets with anticipated department operations for the coming year. On this slide, we present an overview of our budget process. On April 28th, staff conducted a virtual community budget workshop as part of our community outreach. Tonight's meeting is to present the fiscal year 22 City Manager's proposed budget and for the City Council to accept the proposed budget as its own and further consider consider public input. The public hearing and adoption of the proposed budget is scheduled for May 25th. The fiscal year 2022 adopted budget will begin on July 1st, 21. Next slide, please. The agenda for the fiscal year 22 proposed budget is the following: to go over the all fund summary, the general fund summary, the Measure A sales tax fund summary, and Measure P sales tax summary. We will then go over the fiscal year 22 capital improvement program, and then finally the next steps in the budget process. Next slide, please. The proposed budget does not include the recently approved American Rescue Plan funding that will be addressed in a separate City Council action at a later date, as stated by the City Manager. The pension obligation bonds debt service payments are included in the budget. Next slide, please. In February 21, the City issued $350 million in pension obligation bonds to manage retirement costs at a 2.54% interest rate for a 24-year term. A pension obligation bond is a taxable bond issued to investors, with proceeds utilized to refinance part of the city's pension liabilities, known as the unfunded accrued liability, or UAL. The UAL is the shortfall between what the city has in assets and what it will need in assets to fully pay out the benefits that it has promised to retirees under CalPERS, who administers the city's pension plan. CalPERS charges the city a 7% interest rate on the city's pension UAL, and enforces a mandatory repayment schedule. Overall, it is projected that the city will save a significant amount of money that can be used to pay for essential services to residents of Chula Vista with the refinancing of this debt obligation. The benefits of the POB issuance is listed on this slide. Next slide, please. For illustrative purposes, the chart here shows the restructuring strategy from 2022 to 2045, with the green line representing the debt payments for the POBs and the blue bars representing the prior repayment schedule of the UAL with CalPERS. Next slide, please. The budget impacts of the POBs is the following: elimination of the UAL that reduced expenses in the personnel category that will be displayed later on in this presentation, The pension obligation bonds debt service expense is in the other expense categories that will be shown in this presentation. And the establishment of the Section 115 trust contributions to address future pension-related liabilities that are also included in this year's budget in the transfer out category. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. Forward, please. Forward. 2 more slides. 1 more, right there. Listed here are just a few highlights of the projects and initiatives funded in the fiscal year 22 budget, notably the first full year of funding for the new transport service program in the fire department, funding for the reconstruction of the Loma Verde Community Center, repairs and improvements to various public facilities and other infrastructure, increase in the Park and Recreation Department budget for the addition of new city parks. Next slide, please. The city currently has over 125 different funds that make up the City of Chula Vista budget. This presentation will concentrate primarily on the general fund, which is used to pay for the day-to-day operations of the city. This slide represents all budgeted funds. The fiscal year 21 adopted budget revenues exceeded expenditures, resulting in a budgeted surplus of $1.8 million. The fiscal year 22 proposed budget expenses exceed revenues by a total of $10.1 million, which is a planned use of available fund balance for fiscal year 22, which is an overall change of $11.9 million when compared to the fiscal year 21 adopted budget. Next slide, please. All fund revenues for the fiscal year 22 proposed budget increased by $57.2 million compared to the fiscal year 21 adopted budget, which we will go over the significant changes between the fiscal year 22 proposed and the fiscal year 21 adopted budget amounts. Some of the numbers are inflated due to the fact that funds received in one fund and transferred to another fund is double counted on this slide. For example, Measure A and Measure P sales tax are both collected in the general fund and then transferred to their own respective funds. Both the revenues received by the general fund and the revenues received by both the Measure A and P funds are counted in this schedule, thus inflating the actual numbers. We will focus on the significant revenue changes, starting with the property tax category that increased by $3.1 million, which is $1.9 million for property taxes and $1.2 million for motor vehicle license fees, revenues tied to assessed valuations of properties within the city. The next significant change is a $9.2 million increase in the other local taxes category, which accounts primarily for the following revenues. $3 million increase for both Measure A and Measure P sales tax for a combined total of $6 million. $2.6 million increase for sales tax revenues, which we will provide additional details during our general fund update, and $1.8 million increase of the cannabis excise tax. Other agency revenues categories decreased by $3.9 million. This reflects a $1.9 million decrease in contributions from other agencies in the Advanced Life Support Fund due to the elimination of the AMR contract and $1.9 million reduction in grant fund revenues. Charges for services category increased by $15.8 million. This includes $13.8 million for the new Transport Enterprise Fund and $3 million for the Sewer Service Revenue Fund. Lastly, a transfer from other funds increase of $32.2 million primarily for the following: $16.3 million for pension obligation bonds debt service fund, $8.3 million for the Section 115 trust fund contribution related to future retirement costs, and then $2.8 million transferred to both Measure A and Measure P sales tax fund for a total of $5.6 million from the general fund. Next slide, please. This slide represents expenses by budget category for all funds. Personnel services increased by $10.8 million when comparing the fiscal year 21 adopted budget to the fiscal year 22 proposed budget. The increases are in the Transport Enterprise Fund, the Measure A Fund, and the General Fund. The salary savings target decreased by $1.4 million. PERS costs decreased by $23.2 million, which is due to the elimination of the unfunded actuarial liability due to the issuance of the pension obligation bonds. This resulted in an increase of pension bond debt service and contributions to the Section 115 trust fund mentioned previously as seen in the other expenses and transfer out categories below. Health insurance costs decreased by $2.5 million for a total personnel category decrease of $8.5 million for all funds personnel expenses. Supplies and services category increased by $2.3 million, primarily due to establishing a supplies and services budget for the transport program. Other expenses increased by $16 million, mostly establishing the debt service payments for the new pension obligation bonds scheduled in fiscal year 22. Capital category decreased by $1.7 million that is tied to reductions in the Measure P fund and the federal grant funds. CIP project expenditures increased by $27.3 million with the primary drivers in the Measure P fund, the sewer DIP fund, and the transportation grants gas tax fund. Transfer outs increase of $32 million that includes the transfer of $16 million for the pension obligation bonds debt service into its own fund, $8.3 million for the Section 115 trust fund contribution into its own fund, and then the combined $5.6 million for the Measure A, Measure P fund transfer. Overall, the all funds expense increased by $69 million. Next slide, please. And we have taken the 125 funds and grouped them into the categories shown on this slide for illustrative purposes. I just wanted to point out that the Section 115 Trust Fund, which is the third fund from the bottom, is a new fund this year that was authorized by the new pension reserve policy that was recently enacted. Next slide, please. And this slide represents all funds budgeted revenues by fund type. The general fund makes up the largest fund, making up 47% of all revenues budgeted, followed by the sewer funds at 9%, and then debt funds at 6%, and both Measure A and Measure P sales tax funds at 5% each. Next slide, please. And this slide represents all funds budgeted expenses by fund type. The general fund is the largest fund, making up 46% of all expenses, followed by the sewer fund at 9% and Measure P sales tax fund at 9%. Next slide, please. Overall staffing levels in the fiscal year 22 proposed budget increased by 24.5 FTEs compared to the fiscal year 21 adopted budget. Just for clarification, FTE stands for full-time equivalent positions. Total citywide staffing went from 1,161.75 positions to 1,186.25 positions. The general fund increased by 3.5 positions for a total of 850.25 positions in FY22. The non-general fund increased by 21 positions for a total of 336 positions. Next slide, please. The detail for all position changes can be found in the budget book. In fiscal year 21, mid-year changes resulted in a net change of 17 positions in the Measure A sales tax fund. General fund positions changes by departments are shown on the next two slides. Next slide, please. The non-general fund positions changes is reflected on this slide. Overall, general fund fiscal year 22 changes are 3.5 positions, and non-general fund changes are 4 positions. Next slide, please. In fiscal year 21, the adopted budget for the transport positions originally were budgeted in the ALS fund. During FY21, a new transport fund was established, and this action is moving all the transport positions out of the ALS fund and transferring 52 positions to the transport fund and 1 position to the general fund. No net impact to the operations or the structure of the program as a result of this position change. This is a budgetary correction only. Next slide, please. The fiscal year 22 general fund revenues and expenses will increase by $11.4 million or the fiscal year 21 adopted budget for a total of $218.1 million. The general fund budget is balanced for fiscal year 22. Next slide, please. The fiscal year 22 major general fund revenues are projected to increase by $10.9 million or 6.8% over the fiscal year 21 adopted budget. The primary drivers include the following. Property taxes are projected to increase by $1.9 million, a 5% increase. Sales tax revenues are projected to increase by $2.8 million or 7.5% increase. The significant revenue driver to the sales tax is the result of the Wayfair case receiving more revenues from internet-based sales that's allocated from the county pool. Both sales tax and Measure A and Measure P estimates are based on data from our sales tax consultant. Measure A and Measure P are each projected to increase by approximately $3 million or 15% over the fiscal year 21 adopted budget, for a total of $6 million increase combined. These funds are transferred to their own respective funds and do not reside within the general fund. As we have seen over the last several years, utility users' tax have been trending downwards, and the fiscal year 22 budget shows a $1.4 million decrease. The motor vehicle license fee revenues are projected to increase by $1.1 million, a 5% increase. Overall, general fund revenues are projected to increase by $11.4 million, or 5.5%. Next slide, please. And this slide shows assumptions for some of the major revenue categories that we went over on the previous slide. Next slide, please. General fund expenditures increased by $11.4 million, or 5.2%, and we will discuss the significant expenditure assumptions on the following slides. Next slide, please. Personnel services expenses increased by approximately $3.1 million for a total of $97 million. Decrease of the salary savings target of $1.8 million, which went from negative $3.4 million in the fiscal year 21 adopted budget to $1.6 million in fiscal year 22. With the issuance of the pension obligation bonds, the unfunded actuarial liability was paid off, resulting in a $19.3 million decrease in this category. As a result, there is a significant increased cost for the POB debt service and contributions to a Section 115 trust in the transfer out expense category that we will go over on the following slide. Flex insurance costs increased by approximately $1.1 million due to an increase in this year's insurance premiums. Personnel costs decreased overall by $13.2 million. Next slide, please. Transfer outs increased by $23.2 million in the general fund, which includes an increase to the Measure A and Measure P sales tax transfer out of $2.8 million each for revenues collected in the general fund and transferred to their own respective funds for a total of $5.6 million. The general fund portion of the pension obligation bond debt service obligation of $11.7 million that will be transferred out into a separate debt service fund. And then lastly, the Section 115 trust fund contribution of $5.9 million that will be transferred out into its own fund. Next slide, please. This slide compares the fiscal year 21 adopted budget and the fiscal year 22 proposed budget for revenues and expenditures in the Measure A fund. Measure A funds are used to pay for public safety staffing needs in both the police and fire departments. The Measure A Public Safety Expenditure Plan was recently approved by the Measure A Citizens Oversight Committee. Measure A total expenses increased by $3.3 million and revenues increased by approximately $3 million. The largest expense increase is for transfer outs of $1.8 million for both the pension obligation bond debt service payment and Section 115 trust contributions. Next slide, please. This slide compares the fiscal year 21 adopted budget and the fiscal year 22 proposed budget for revenues and expenditures in the Measure P fund. The Measure P fund is used to pay for the replacement and repair of capital assets to address the city's deferred maintenance needs. The Measure P spending plan was recently approved by the Measure P Citizens Oversight Committee. Measure P total expenses increased by $23.4 million and revenues increased by $2.8 million. Available fund balance would be used to cover expenses. The largest expense increase is for CIP expenses with a total budget of $27.5 million in fiscal year 22. This includes funding for the following projects: $15 million for the Loma Verde Community Center, $4.4 million for other public infrastructure, which includes storm drains, sidewalks, and trees, $2.5 million for park facilities. A detailed list can be found in the CIP section of the budget document. At this point, I will hand it over to Mr. Bilby to go over the general fund long-term financial plan. Next slide, please.
Before you move on, I've been doing budget a long time. I've never been so relaxed after listening to Ed present the budget.
Right.
He does such a good job. Thank you. And I know I put a lot of pressure on on him to get the budget done earlier than we've ever have, so I did want to publicly thank him for that.
Thank you, Ed.
No problem, thank you.
Mr. Bilby?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. It's my pleasure to present the long-term financial plan portion of tonight's presentation. The long-term financial plan serves as a long-range fiscal planning tool to identify financial trends, project budgetary surpluses and deficits, and encourage discussion to proactively address the city's long-range needs. It's important to note the long-term financial plan is specifically overseeing the general fund. Next slide, please. As a planning tool, the long-term financial plan does not represent future budgets. It does not make expenditure decisions, but rather highlights the need to prioritize the allocation of city resources to ensure the continuation of core city services. The purpose of the plan is to provide City Council, key stakeholders, and the public an overview of the city's fiscal health based on various financial and service level assumptions over the next 5 and 10 years, and allow for the discussion of necessary steps to be initiated during the development and implementation of future budgets. The current long-term financial plan projects a $2.2 million deficit starting in 2023, projected to grow to $10.4 million through fiscal year 2026. Next slide, please. Over the 10 years, the long-term financial plan is projected to grow to $22 million by year 10 in fiscal year 2031. Next slide, please. For our long-term financial plan revenues, major assumptions include the waning impact of COVID-19 on our city's major revenues, including transient occupancy tax and short-term rentals, as long as our departmental revenues in Park and Rec. Cannabis revenues are projected at $2.8 million, as Ed mentioned earlier in the presentation. What the city staff did to project those revenues, obviously it's a difficult time to be able to do that because we're waiting for so many of the establishments to open. So what we did is we met with all of the providers, asked them for their financials. We looked at what their estimates were. We looked at what other agencies' estimates were for cannabis tax revenues. We have their estimated opening dates and then projected excise tax revenue off of that. So the $2.8 million is as accurate as we can get based upon the information that we have available for this year. For the following years, what we did is we looked at the models of some other agencies. Some agencies doubled or tripled revenues in years 2 and 3. We thought that that would be aggressive to take such a large number. And so what we did is we basically started with a fairly large growth rate in 2024 at 40%, which is still lower than every other example that we found, and then lowered it each year thereafter, kind of landing in a 10% sustained growth rate until the market matures in the future. So obviously we're going to continue to come back to council with updated information as those establishments open and excise tax is collected. We feel like that's a good conservative start, which is probably why the long-term financial plan may be a little more unbalanced than it likely will be in the future when we actually face those budgetary challenges. Staff did utilize conservative growth rates. Specifically, sales tax has been a challenge for our sales tax consultant. So if you look at the prior years, we've actually grown tremendously. And so you saw a pretty large increase in the fiscal year 22 budget. So what the consultant is telling us is basically fast forwarded a lot of sales tax growth because of all the stimulus. And so they're afraid to really go out and project large continued growth because they assume that some of that federal stimulus is going to get eventually pulled back. And we're all going to go back to whatever the natural disposable income is for a community that's growing, that's healthy, but at the same time, we still lose a little bit of that sales tax revenue that we've talked about before as it relates to the county pool portion and the continuing disappearance of brick and mortar and retail sales. So it's kind of balancing out into a very slow, they estimate 1% long-term growth in our sales tax. I believe there's a solid chance we could beat that, but we don't want to tell council that we anticipate aggressive growth, especially with all the uncertainty related to the long-term financial plan revenues. Next slide, please. For our long-term financial plan expenditures, we continue to assume conservative personnel cost inflation at 2%, so that's the primary driver. Pension costs really are no longer the major impact. Health insurance now continues to be a significant driver of expenditures. And so when you have revenues and expenditures kind of tied out at, let's say, 2%, but then you have healthcare costs growing at 7 to 10, causes that disequilibrium. So we're hoping to continue to find ways to balance that out in future years. Also, of course, we've got the Bayfront project and the commitments there. And we've got our commitments to, and this is a good problem to have, we're committing money to reserves for our pension debt. And so if we were not doing that, we could use all of that money. If we hadn't adopted those responsible policies, we could use all that money to, have more services, but then at the same time, we wouldn't be able to balance it in future years when eventually CalPERS comes knocking for some additional payments in the future. So we're going to set aside, as Ed mentioned, $8 million in '22. It grows tremendously up to over $12 million by the third year, and we will continue to set aside tens of millions of dollars into the reserve fund through 2031. And the good news on the CalPERS side, good, bad, is they're having a great year this year. We're not going to know exactly what that rate of return is, but right now the S&P 500's up almost 30%. And so with any luck, they'll finish the year at or better than they are now. And so we'll be looking at a solid double-digit return rate from CalPERS. What that will do is it'll create a pension surplus for fiscal year 2024, which will more than offset the pension deficit in 2023 from that small miss they had last year of the 4.7% investment rate of return from the prior year. So all in all, Chula Vista should be in a net surplus position with CalPERS. And that is a favorable position to be in. A lot of media might say that a net surplus is not a good thing because of what happened in 98, 99, and 2000 with cities taking steps to enhance pension benefits. That is no longer allowed with PEPRA. And so we are being responsible with our pension money. We are going to continue to be responsible with our pension liabilities. And we are doing all the right things as far as best practices go in that regard. Next slide, please. The long-term financial plan projects, obviously, the deficit to grow from 2 to 15 million in 27. I mentioned health insurance costs, the primary driver there. Some challenges obviously include uncertainty regarding the economic downturn and when we'll kind of turn the corner related to COVID-19. Next slide, please. So gross domestic product has been strong, unemployment has been reducing, and the housing market is on fire. Those are all things that you guys are seeing in the media. Obviously, pre-COVID, the unemployment rate was extremely low. One of the things that I see as a bit of a red flag is that the Fed expects us to go down to pre-COVID unemployment rates, which we only hit that 3.9% unemployment rate 2 times in the history of the country. So to set that as the bar of what we need to achieve, there's a lot of people that believe that 5-6% unemployment is a healthy unemployment rate with appropriate transition of staffing and wage growth. 3.9 is aggressive, but I think they're trying to overcorrect from the mistakes they made a decade ago. And so we're seeing the Fed be extremely accommodative for an extremely long period of time until they're going to let inflation heat up. And so that's going to allow the economy to do really well and our revenues to do really well, but eventually they're going to have to pull back on that kind of easy money policy. The city, continues to do well. I don't anticipate any major changes to the housing market. Interest rates are going to stay low. And obviously the driver right now that's different, if you go back to 06 through 08 and what caused the housing crisis last time, the key difference this time is we have a supply shortage. We had a supply surplus in 2006, and it's a very large supply shortage. We have more people needing homes than we have homes being built, and so that's a good thing, which is why we continue to assume housing market growth in the future. Next slide, please. So some risks, and I touched on these briefly, but major uncertainties that I wanted to make sure to relay to council. Fiscal stimulus and how they pull that back. We're seeing a lot of positive fiscal impacts on the city as a result of CARES Act, as a result of the future ARP, and some of the other infrastructure discussions that they're having that they're hoping to adopt. Those will all push money forward and provide some lasting money on the capital improvement side. But it's just important to understand that they probably won't be able to just cut checks to every American forever. And so at some point that process is going to get kind of pulled back, and there's going to be a fiscal impact to that. COVID-19 itself, we've kind of touched on how fast the economy reopens and what the new economy looks like has a lot of uncertainty. Sorry. And so, we'll continue to come back to council with updates on how we see that playing out. I see some winners and some losers in this new economy. And it may balance out or it may turn out net positive, but obviously you're seeing a lot more, activity moving to the technology industry, and a lot less kind of focused on brick and mortar. And my last one that I've mentioned several times to council is stock market valuation. The current stock market is at a very high earnings ratio, PE ratio. There's been a lot of experts that have shouted that it's going to crash. I don't know that a crash is what we should talk about or assume, but being responsible and looking at averages, the stock market probably can't continue to grow at its current growth rate. There's a lot of speculation in the market right now. Speculation is an unhealthy thing in any market, whether it be the stock market or housing market. So when you see prices get overinflated in a specific area, specific region or industry, it's important to be mindful of those and look out and make good conservative decisions, not assuming that the stock market's going to continue to grow at 20% forever. We're at only 2 times in history has the stock market been this expensive. 1999 was one of them, and the tech crash happened. And so I think there's a lot of people assuming more of a slow glide because the Fed's going to do the right things at the right times, but assume a very low rate of return on the stock market to get us back to more normal PE ratios. With that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Bob Beeman to present the Capital Improvement Program.
Oh, thank you, David. The CIP program for next fiscal year is proposed at $49.2 million. Next slide, please. This slide shows a breakdown of funding by asset management system. As indicated, over 42% has been programmed for buildings, and the roadway system represents the next highest at nearly 34%. Next slide, please. This slide provides a breakdown by funding source. As you can see, most of the CIP program is funded by Measure P at over 55%, and Transnet and gas tax combined makes up about 30%. On an average year, that number would normally be over 50%. Next slide, please. Some of the major highlights for next fiscal year includes $10.5 million has been programmed to complete pavement rehab projects on major and local streets to extend street life. The city will also be completing drainage and sewer projects at over $4 million each. There's funding of over $2.8 million programmed to complete repairs for parks, courts, and sports fields. Next slide, please. There's also over $20 million programmed for building projects, including $15.1 million to reconstruct the Loma Verde Recreation Center. This project is a great example of how Measure P has impacted the CIP program by being able to design and reconstruct a facility that is nearly 50 years old and is needed by the community. There's also Measure P funding associated with completing repairs at other public buildings such as the fire stations, the police facility, and the libraries. Also, after the Boys and Girls Club has been renovated, the Community Service Department will be taking over operations of that facility. Next slide, please. Over the past year, the city administered 3 pavement projects that treated over 150 roadway segments, which amounted to over 22 miles of roadways reconditioned. The total cost of these projects was $20 million, and approximately $15 million was funded by Measure P to rehab residential streets. Next slide, please. The city received a Smart Growth Incentive Program grant of $2.5 million to complete the 3rd and final phase of the 3rd Avenue Streetscape project. This project was completed in January of this year. Next slide, please. Construction of Fire Station 5 began in March of last year and was completed in March of this year. Next slide, please. Construction of Fire Station 3, formerly known as Fire Station 9, began in April of last year and was completed last month. The total cost for both fire stations was $20 million and was funded by Measure P. Next slide, please. The city is overseeing an emergency repair of a sinkhole on Energy Way, which involved tunneling under the street to repair a 66-inch diameter pipe. This project should be completed by the end of this month. Next slide, please. This slide shows a snapshot of the CIP program over the last 10 years. The top line shows the overall CIP. As you can see, there was a spike in funding in fiscal year 18, and another spike is proposed for next fiscal year due to the increase in Measure P funding, thereby allowing the city to complete additional improvements associated with buildings, drainage, parks, and so on. That completes the CIP presentation, so I'll turn it back over to Finance.
So at this point, staff is asking, in regards to the next steps for the city council to accept the city manager's proposed budget as their own, and to set May 25th as the date for the public hearing and adoption of the budget. We welcome any comments from the public at this meeting. Additional public comments can also be submitted on the city's website. A copy of the budget can also be found on the city's website. Next slide, please. And this is the resolution language that was attached to this item. Next slide, please. And at this point, this concludes our presentation, and we're open for any comments or feedback, and staff is available for any questions. Thank you.
So thank you, Ed, Bob, and Dave for an excellent presentation. And again, my compliments for a budget that was well done. The city manager, I loved your intro letter. It was, I think that that's going to be something that the public that's not so familiar with financing can get a really clear snapshot of some of the major highlights of our budget. I just wanted to say some things. When I was listening about, all the good things that are happening and the way that the city has insulated it from volatility in the future. And I was at a League of Cities meeting just the other day where I was telling my colleagues, other mayors and city council people, that from my experience in being a state assembly person and being a city council person, is that, I truly understand the volatility of the way that California finances are structured and the revenues that come in. And so we've just had stellar years with an overperformance of the stock market. But I walked into the assembly in 2006 with a budget surplus, and the very next year, the state of California had a $20 billion deficit because of circumstances, a crash of the housing market, poor performance on the stock market, all of those things. And another thing is that, while we can celebrate the increase in housing prices, what that is going to do socially in the long term is really create a situation when we have even more inequities in our society. And the pandemic and the way that there were winners and losers in the pandemic have just really shown us just how fragile some families are relative to being able to insulate themselves from hardships. Many of our families don't invest in retirement plans and enjoy the stock market benefits of that. Many of our families have been priced out of the housing market and don't realize those appreciations in their household. And as a matter of fact, as renters, they're seeing an increase in their rents, exponential increases in their rents that make it more and more difficult for them. So, while we may celebrate, our balanced budget for this year, what we need to do is make sure that whatever policies that we put in place is that we leave as few people behind as possible. That is just simply our responsibility that we have to do as a city council. I'm so glad that Mr. Gonzalo Lopez was here that was talking about, the fragility of our medical system and how impactful it is, especially people that don't have those health insurance benefits. But the impact to us as cities and as businesses because of the escalating cost of health care. So there are so many factors going into this, but certainly the things that we've done to insulate ourselves from those volatile kind of situations that would put our city at risk are remarkable. And, you know, we really have to thank our city manager that was appointed in the very best time, worst times and the best times for us. Best times because she's got such financial background and acumen. And then to you, David, and your staff, Bob and Ed, that are really spectacular. I really want to thank all of the work that you've done on the budget as well. So, you know, we move forward looking very hopeful, and our budget looking strong for, you know, now. And I just want to thank our staff for being prudent and judicial in the way that we have structured our city, the way that we handled ourselves through the pandemic, and you know, did all the fiscally responsible things to make sure that our city did not fall into you know, a financial crisis. And for that, we're really happy. Madam Clerk, did you want to set the timer for, what is it, on public comments? It's 5 minutes, or what is it?
We'll set the timer for 2 minutes, and if there are any in-person commenters, they would be allowed 5 minutes, although we don't have any in-person commenters at this time.
Okay, thank you. And while we're waiting for
And Madam
that-
Mayor,
Yes.
if I might, this item has, although it didn't legally need to be
I
required
need
to
to
be set up
open
at
the-
this point,
Yeah.
ultimately it would need to be a public hearing. But since
Okay.
it's set up as one, I would open a public hearing too as part
Okay.
of this.
All right, I forgot
process.
about that. So I will open the public hearing right now. Move it over to our council meeting. Is there any public hearing of the speaker hearing? Do I leave it open for us?
I would close it, because then you're going to notice one separately.
Okay.
Yeah, yep. Good question, Madam Mayor.
Madam Clerk, did we receive any additional comments?
No e-comments have been received, and we don't have any members of the public to speak on this item.
Okay, with that, I will turn to the council members for any comments and close the public hearing. Mr. McCann?
Thank you. I first want to thank Maria. I think that I've been with the city and other organizations, government-wise, nonprofit-wise, and private-wise, and this is one of the best budgets we've had. I've been here during the good days, the bad days, but I think what is key here is that this sets us up so in the future, if we do hit some bad times, that we will be insulated as much as possible. several years ago, we decided to fully fund our reserves. Then we took on the challenge of the pension obligations, unfunded pension liabilities, and we did the pension obligation bonds. And I think that truly gives us that financial security from here through the forward. And as long as we, as a city, will be fiscally responsible, I think we're going to be able to preserve our city services. And I really appreciate all our city employees. And we're doing this not only for our citizens, but also them to make sure that they have a stable place to work and that our citizens have continued level of city services without interruption. I want to thank Ed Prindell. I just can't say enough nice things about Ed. We had a great Zoom meeting to be able to give me a briefing on the budget. And again, I want to give Ed an A+. He did a great job, and I really, really appreciate him. I want to thank David Bilby. I think one of the great things about David is that he looks forward. He's not always looking at what's happening today or what's happening this month, but he's also looking at years ahead to make sure that we're not only financially responsible this year and next year, but in the future for years to come. And I want to thank Bob on his overview of the CIP projects. I very, very much appreciate that, and there's so many good things that did happen. So with that, I just want to thank you, and I'd be happy to make the motion when it is appropriate to approve the budget. Thank you.
So, seeing no other comments from the other count. Okay, Mr. Galvez, and followed by Mr. Padilla.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you for an excellent presentation, and wow, after the year that we've had, to see that our numbers are not looking as scary as they did this time last year. I mean, this time last year it was, and the year before, just the forecasts, especially with pension obligations and unfunded actuarial liabilities, were really scary. And that 2.54% rate that you refinanced their POBs. I think, David, you said that they were historic at the time, and they haven't been matched since by any other municipality. So, excellent job. That's a testament to your stewardship, Maria, Ed, David, all the departments in the city of Chula Vista, and especially the employees, the bargaining units that took a 0% pay increase or minimal pay increases. That really helped us a lot. So that really saved our bacon. I am concerned and would continue to like to take a conservative approach in identifying some of these outliers that could continue to escalate. A 9.4% increase in healthcare costs year over year is disconcerting, and I'm hoping that, I know everyone's busy and we've got a lot on our plates, and especially with all the hiring of police officers and everything else that our human resources department is doing. I hope that they might take another look at how they could save some money in that, or perhaps renegotiate. I'm interested in seeing transport numbers. It's good that this budget included a full year, 'cause that was in addition to your letter. So that was nice to see that we just included that in this year's budget and count on not seeing any revenue, even though we know we will see some. I'm very curious to see how that flows, and hopefully we'll get an update later this summer. But this COVID crisis is affecting a lot of different areas that remain unknown, and one of the unknowns will be the impacts to the sewer fund. So maybe if we could get a briefing later on uncollectibles in our sewer funding. And I also understand that our municipality manager, Republic Services, may have some uncollectibles, and so I'd be interested to see how our franchise agreements kind of shape up in the year to come, and how that rolls out and affects our city. So excellent job by all. It was you did a lot of work that engineering and public works department spent money wisely and really handled a lot of major projects this year. And couldn't be prouder to be a Chula Vistan under the management of our excellent city manager and her staff, our city mayor, and my colleagues on the council. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Padilla, followed by Ms. Cardenas.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and I would echo all the comments of our colleagues with respect to the amazing job that the city manager and her staff and everyone have done. I think in terms of the resolution before us, obviously, taking this as our proposed budget, obviously, we're not adopting it here tonight because there's further public input to receive and hearings to be had. But that said, I think this is the right framework. I was just thinking a moment ago, done a lot of work, Madam Mayor, in the last few years, a lot of fundamental work around how we extend our ability to leverage funding around infrastructure, public safety staffing, how we seek out and exploit revenue opportunities, how we stabilize revenue, how we deal with unfunded liability, key projects that continue to be nurtured along and that are on the horizon. So many things that have been so important work and decision-making over the last few years are really starting to maybe bear some fruit. And I would echo my colleagues in terms of the fact that it's one of the more pleasant budget presentations, knock on wood, in a long time, and very thoughtfully put together. I think more than adequately reflects the priorities that this council has laid out in recent years, more than adequately provides a framework to help facilitate achieving those goals. I was even a bit surprised in looking at over the programmed expenditures in the budget and our estimates for the coming cycle on the general sales tax receipts, for example. That surprised me, given everything we were worried about with COVID, and learning later that had a lot to do, frankly, with people just switching to shopping in a different way and are capturing a greater, appropriate share of those receipts because of Wayfair and other things. So, the planets have aligned in some ways and helped us out tremendously, and good, prudent policy making and recommendations and work on behalf of our staff have really helped put us in a fairly solid position in a time when many municipalities would not have landed here. So again, this is the right framework. I think it's well put together. I'm happy to support the resolution, and again, thanks everybody.
So that is the second.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cardenas.
Well, I'll echo what everybody has said, and fantastic job from everyone on the city staff that's worked on this. I think that there has been just a lot of fear in our community. COVID has really showcased a lot of the inequities that has plagued a lot of the folks in not just our city, but in our region, and it really has highlighted a lot of it. And so coming into this, it was scary to see what would happen. And so with that being said, I'm just very excited to see the real investments that are going to be happening in the west side. And I know that Councilmember Galvez joins me in that excitement, and the rest of the council. And so, I'm really excited that this is the first budget that I'm seeing as a council member. So
Let's hope they're always that good.
I know. I'm getting spoiled for my first one. So so I'm excited. Thank you to the staff that was able to answer all my questions leading up to today. As my first process, this was really enlightening and really informative. So thank you, everyone, and I'm excited to see this through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just another thing is, Mr. Padilla really pointed something out. We have done so much, especially in this year of COVID, and we're going to do so much next year, and all of it is really improvement of public service and infrastructure. And so we have to do a better job of tooting our own horns and letting the public know just how many projects that are going to be out there, and the millions that we're going to be spending on their behalf, so they can enjoy better recreation centers, better libraries, better public safety. And so it's really wonderful to see that work happening. And for a change, instead of holding the line, just holding the line and trying to just get the basics through, that we're actually going to have to, that we're actually now working on improvements, and that those improvements are going to benefit so many people in our community. Really excited about what's happening in District 4, with the new fire stations in the Loma Verde. It's not going to be a remodel, it's going to be a new recreation center. So, and so many good things happening in the city of Chula Vista. And we have to toot our own horns, and we have to, take the show on the road and let people know exactly what's happening. So, because so many people that live in their own neighborhoods don't cross over to see what's happening in other neighborhoods. And so with that, we have a motion and a second, and we've had the public comments, right? And so, and I've closed the public hearing. I want to make sure that I've done everything. And so with that, Madam Clerk, please read the heading and waive the text.
Item 10 is resolution of the City Council, successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency, Housing Authority of the City of Chula Vista, accepting the city manager's proposed operating and capital improvement budgets for fiscal year 2021-2022 for each agency as their proposed budgets respectively, and setting the time and place for a public hearing for final consideration and adoption of same.
Please vote. Okay, and the motion passes unanimously, and now we've taken the budget, and it now belongs to us, and we'll be hearing this again on May the 25th. Thank you very much for all the staff that worked on this. Okay, moving on to action items, we do have one action item, and that's a consideration of amending the fiscal year. Oops, wait a minute. Yes. Consideration of amending the fiscal year 2021 CIP budget for the design and pre-construction services for the segment 3 of the Loma Verde Recreation Center. And I think that we need to reserve whatever motion we have and give that to Ms. Cardenas. Okay, is there a staff report?
Yes, Madam Mayor, council members, we do have Patricia Furman who will be providing your presentation. This is a very exciting project for us. When we started working on Measure P, we had allocated about $2 million for some repairs, but once we went inside, particularly on the recreation side, we realized that that would be a waste of money, that this facility really needed to be completely torn down and replaced. And this happened, we started looking at this pre-COVID. And now having gone through a year where this part of the community was hit very hard with COVID, we felt that it was very important for us to really focus on making this happen, because this facility provides a lot of services to this part of the community from a wellness standpoint. So that's the other reason we're bringing this forward as a priority to the City Council for consideration. So with that, I will pass it over to Patricia.
Well, thank you very much. City Manager, good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members and City staff and members of the public. We are very, very excited to present the Loma Verde project to you and provide information about what has been going on during the last year. Especially after listening into the budget presentation, it's so exciting to actually show you the design that we're proposing. Next slide, please. Great. So the center, as you know, is in District 4 and is among the busiest recreation centers. It is located north of Orange Avenue and east of Hilltop Drive, between the Loma Verde Elementary School and the Rienstra Sports Complex. Next slide, please. The building was constructed in the 1970s, and over the years, it has been remodeled and repaired as needed. Next slide. But due to limited maintenance funding, several areas of the building need improvements. For example, the building has a roof that leaks, resulting in extensive water damage to the wood floors, cabinets, and several areas of the recreation center. The photo at the bottom right shows the floor shifting, causing tiles to buckle, creating an uneven floor. Next slide. This slide shows the old floors, which absorb dirt and grime, and the drains and the flooring of the changing rooms do not even drain. They don't even drain well, so causing excess of moisture, which creates mold. These are just a few examples of all the problems this building has. Next slide, please. There are no changing stalls in the men's changing rooms, preventing privacy while changing. In addition, some of the changing rooms have no drainage. And like I said before, it causes mold and the drywall to crumble because of the moisture. When visiting the center, it is evident that the building needs so many improvements that the best course of action is to demolish and reconstruct the center. Next slide. So the city saw a huge need and started looking for funding to reach out to the community and to create a concept for this center. So in 2019, the city team worked closely with several community groups to obtain their input and to create a list of priorities. Next slide. The participants were very enthusiastic and they employed preference exercises to provide input for the facility. Next. Next slide, please. And they also employed a survey and preference exercises to provide feedback. A survey was available in English and Spanish to gauge interest in different types of programming for all age groups. Next slide. With all the input that we received from the community, we created a list of amenities which have been used to develop the design for the center. Next slide. So the next step was to develop that list of amenities, and in April of last year, yes, right during the COVID year, the city issued an RFP for collaborative design build services and entered into an agreement with Easy Constructors for the center's design. Next slide. So in July 27 and November 30th, we provided the community the schematic designs that we had created based on the list of amenities that they provided. It was a very good learning experience because we were going through the COVID and the limitations that came with the COVID virus. So we had to learn how to have a public meeting virtually. And it was very good that it was very well attended. We received many comments and questions, and we were able to present it in English and Spanish and also answer in English and Spanish. So it was very successful. Next slide, please. So this shows the existing floor plan. And the existing floor plan, what I want to bring to your attention is how the building, the recreation area and the aquatic center are separated and how this provides a challenge, an operational challenge for staff. Next slide. So the current project includes segments 1 and 2, which totals approximately 20,000 square feet. Segment 3 includes the pool, the deck, and the eastern wing of the building, and is not part of the current scope of work. Next slide. However, we felt that it was important to study the relationship between uses, and a high-level master plan was created to visualize the amenities and services that could be offered here. For example, the pool could have a zero-depth entry area used for therapy and classes, and a separate 50-meter competition pool. The building within segment 3 would have space for a new pool, mechanical equipment, and storage and classroom. Next slide. So with that, now it's my pleasure to introduce Christy Jewett, She is an architect with Jeff Katz Architecture, and she will share with us the floor plan.
Thanks, Patricia. I will first turn it to Jim Summers from EC Constructors. He's going to give just a general overview, and then I will take you through the entire floor plan and some renderings of the project.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. Hi, everyone. We're really excited to be part of this project and able to help the city improve this facility for the community. So you can kind of see in an overview here, one of the big things that came out of the survey was getting an improved multi-purpose room. So in the upper left-hand corner, you can see a multi-purpose room that will actually fits a high school basketball court and then various other court layouts. In the lower left-hand side is more the recreation side of the facility, and the lower right-hand side is new changing rooms and things like that. Early on in the project, when we were originally just designing segment 1, we talked with Patricia and developed the scheme that she showed a little bit earlier for the master plan and talked about how we needed to give the front of the building a new face all at once. So that's how we got into segment 1 and 2. And as you'll see moving through here, it's going to be a tremendous improvement for the district. For the city. Christy, next slide, please.
All right, so I will just walk you through some specific areas of the building design. And as Patricia touched on earlier, one of the issues with the current building is that there are 2 separate entries for the recreation and the pool functions. So with this new layout, we consolidated the lobby and entrance. So less staff would be required to essentially supervise and receive guests at the community center. So in this plan, what you're seeing is that lobby, reception area, a couple of offices, IT space, along with a game room with billiards, ping pong, and some other various games. There's a small fitness room, and then a dance room that is one large room that has a operable partition in the middle that is also connected to the crafts room with another operable partition. So those could be open to one large space or divided into smaller spaces. A few storage areas, mechanical areas, and then men's and women's restrooms in this part of the building. Next slide, please. Here is the multi-purpose gymnasium that Jim touched on, along with a storage space for that. Next slide. Now, on the aquatic side, we do have a staff break room with dedicated men's and women's restrooms, some storage for staff, and then we have the women's and men's changing areas, along with 3 family dressing areas that are separate from those men's and women's changing areas. We have a outdoor cubby area for storage during when people are using the facilities, and then some utilities down in the bottom right corner. Next slide, please. So we'll just take you through a few 3D renderings of the space so you can kind of get the feel of the building design, and just wanted to kind of walk you through our design. So here is the entryway. Next slide, please. Here's that lobby that we're talking about with a large reception desk with doors and hallways into both the aquatics area and the recreation side of the building. Next slide, please. A shot from the front door into the game room. Next. This is in one of the dance rooms with, on the right side of the screen, you can see that operable partition that I mentioned with mirrors on the wall, dance bars, and appropriate surfaces in that room. Next, please. Another shot from the dance rooms into the crafts room beyond. Next, please. Crafts room with a small kitchenette area and some chairs and tables, and in the background you can see the multi-purpose gymnasium. Next. Here's a view into the gymnasium. Next, please. A small fitness room. Next. This is into one of the administrative offices. Next, please. This is from the pool deck looking back onto the building, and so you can see the entries into the lobby, the office, and staff areas, as well as the men's and women's changing rooms and family changing rooms. Next. Another view from the pool area into the cubbies. Next, please. And this is just a shot into one of the changing room areas. Next, please. And here is the exterior of the building with the consolidated entry point with very clear wayfinding signage. And next, please. And finally, looking northwest from Loma Lane, the exterior of the building. And I will turn it over to Patricia to thank you.
Thank you, Christy and Jim. Next slide. Thank you. Perfect. So as you know, the funding for this work effort is from Measure P. And today we're requesting approval of the appropriation of $600,000 from the Measure P spending plan for design and pre-construction services for segment 3. Next slide. So what are the next steps? So we plan to continue working on construction documents for segments 1 and 2, and we plan to complete those documents in June of this year. If the appropriation of the $600,000 is approved, then the next step would be to start the design of segment 3. As you know, we feel that it's important to complete that segment to design a complete center for the community. Also, part of the CIP budget that was just reviewed includes $15 million for the construction of segments 1 and 2, which you just reviewed. And if that is adopted, then the next step would be to work on the next phase of construction and come back to City Council for approval of the construction contract. Next slide. And that concludes our presentations, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a wonderful design, and really looking forward to seeing the completed design and then seeing the final construction of it. I did have one question though on the dressing rooms and the restrooms. Do you have a couple of them that are reserved for gender neutral to go into? I mean, I'm old school, so I would always want to go into a women's changing facility, but there are some people that do believe that there should be some gender neutral options.
That is a great question. We are providing 3 family changing rooms, which will be gender neutral changing restrooms.
Okay, awesome. So with that, Ms. Cardenas, you have your speaker button on first. Oh, okay, before any motions are made, though, we have to do the public comments. Yes, Ms. Galvez has a question.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Could you go to slide 32? And my main question is regarding, and I hope we're allowed to do this, provide input and requests as a community member and council member, but the multi-purpose room where basketball will be played and I'm assuming some scrimmages will be held. I noticed that it doesn't have much room for the seating in the multi-purpose room, and attending sporting events is parents' favorite thing to do usually when their children are growing. And I was wondering if there could be an additional seating or spectator area north of where the pool spectator area is in that space. And maybe that it could be outdoors, or you could have windows kind of looking into into the multi-purpose room. But I just, remember the days of trying to watch a basketball game and figuring out where to sit. And that's going to be, I think that would be a welcome addition to the parents to have some sort of, maybe an outdoor covered seating area with eyes on the basketball area. That would be my only comment or suggestion. And the current spectator seating area also that you've got down by the lower pool, I'm wondering if, I guess that's where the water polo, where will the water polo viewing area be? The top spectator seating area?
Councilmember Galvez, this is Tim Farmer, Parks and Recreation. We did take into consideration the seating arrangement. I know most of our gymnasium facilities do not have a lot of space outside of the boundaries of the courts, but we do have plans to install bleachers, so single level bleachers that would allow seating around the perimeter of all the games. We can look with CATS and NEC to see if there's any other options to put in additional spectator seating, although I think we are pretty tapped out as far as available space. And then as far as your question regarding the seating for the water polo and swimming, currently right outside the east side of the multi-purpose room, that's where our spectator seating is right now. And I think we're looking to maintain that for the time being. Once we get into segment 3, then that will be discussed as far as where is the most appropriate space to put spectator area. Some other facilities like Coronado has a small section for spectator seating, but they have a lot of tables and chairs and umbrellas where people can kind of spread throughout the deck instead of having them consolidated in one area. So that'll all be a part of segment 3.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. And if possible, I don't know, what kind of construction could allow for viewing into the multipurpose room. I think that parents and spectators would be fine watching outside of the basketball area, as long as they could see through a window. That might be really a fun thing to do. Just a thought. Thank you. That's all.
Yeah, I think that spectator area is really important too. Okay, Mr. McCann.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Christy, Jim, and Patricia for doing such a great job. This is very special to me. I learned how to swim at Loma Verde Pool, and I know played Little League. We called it Max Field, but I guess it's now Reinstra Field. But either way, it was a great place, and it's really nice to see how they've maximizing the use of space, looking at it from a holistic point of view, making sure that they create one entry for both recreational and swimming. I know that became sometime an issue when me or my friends were getting picked up, which entrance your parents or your relatives would come in to pick you up. And I just, again, think this is a great job, and I appreciate all your efforts in doing this. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, will you please set the timer for 2 minutes to allow for additional public comments? Did we receive any other comments?
No comments were received, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cardenas?
Before I make the motion, I do want to say that just like Councilmember McCann, I also learned how to swim at Loma Verde, so I'm really excited to see this project. You know, in the west side, we don't have access to as many rec centers or pools as there are in the east side, so this is something that's really important for so many of our children and residents. And even in the 90s, when I was learning how to swim, this place needed a lot of help. So I'm really excited, and with that, I make the motion to approve this item.
Okay, the motion has been made by Ms. Cardenas.
And Madam Mayor, I'd like to second that and just say that I hope that this facility is even more beautiful than Coronado's. And we'll allow them to come and visit us. Thank you.
We are so competitive. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you read the heading, please?
Item 11 is resolution of the City Council of the City of Chula Vista appropriating $600,000 from the Measure P spending plan to CIP GGV 0247 for design and pre-construction services for Segment 3 of the Loma Verde Recreation Center project. 4/5 vote required.
Okay, please vote. Okay, and the resolution passes unanimously. That's great. Okay, with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the great presentation and the awesome designs, okay? So with that, we'll go on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Just one item, a very exciting one. This afternoon, the San Diego Port Commissioners approved unanimously the ground lease with Rita Development for the Gaylord project on our bayfront. They also consented to the management agreement between Rita and Marriott International, who will be the operator for the Hotel Conference Center. So on to the next steps, which is bringing forward to the City Council and the Port Commissioners various lease documents and financing documents, which staff are working very hard to finalize. It has taken over our lives. It's taken over Glenn Guggen's life and Tiffany Allen's life, certainly over the last few weeks to try to get these documents across the finish line. So I do want to thank them publicly. But we're very excited about the actions that the Port took today.
Okay, it's been a long time in coming. That's really great news. With that, going on to my mayor's report, I'd like to combine two items, Mr. Padilla's report and mine relative to commission appointments. So I would like the ratification of the following to the boards and commissions. Robert Cromer to the Measure A Citizens Oversight Committee, and he'll be representing the Chula Vista Chamber of Commerce. And Francisco Rivera to the Measure A Oversight Committee, and he will be representing the Chula Vista Mid-Managers and Professional Association. And Mr. Padilla, what will your pleasure be?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just ask for ratification of the appointment of Paul Vicati to the Measure A Citizens Oversight Committee at large representing the 3rd District.
Okay, so I will make the motion to ratify. And is there a second? Mr. Padilla?
Madam Mayor, before we vote, we do want to get public comment on this
right.
one, too. Yep,
Dang.
thank you, Madam
Okay.
Mayor.
Madam Clerk, would you please set the timer? And I suppose I better get used to that because now we're going from virtual to the option of both virtual and live. And I suppose that's going to be a permanent situation with us now for the foreseeable future. Madam Clerk, did we get any comments?
No comments were received.
Okay, with that, we have the motion and a second, so I'll call for the vote.
And we'll set up the electronic voting for you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Please vote. Okay, so they are ratified unanimously, and Madam Clerk, would you please advise them as such? I'll continue with my mayor's report. So I wanted to take a moment to share with you that this is National Police Week, and National Police Week is dedicated to honoring America's law enforcement community. And this Saturday, May the 15th, is Peace Officers Memorial Day. And Peace Officers Memorial Day pays tribute to the local, state, and federal peace officers who have died or who have been disabled in the line of duty, and it is celebrated on May 15th of each year. And with that, I hope we take a moment on Saturday to pay tribute to the hard work that our police department does to keep our community safe, and the sacrifice that they have made to ensure our safety. I also wanted to report that I was really honored. I mean, I think that this is the most meaningful award that I've ever gotten, and that is I was named the 2021 Latino Spirits Award for my community service by the California Legislative Latino Caucus. So it's a statewide recognition, and I was just really honored to have that recognition. And I want to thank my Assemblywoman, Lorena Gonzalez, for putting my name forward. And then, let's see, Friday the 7th, Jill Galvez and I attended the farewell event for Ricardo Pineda at Casa Don Diego. He worked as a waiter there for 37 years, but his accomplishments were really remarkable. He has 5 children, he and his wife, and on his waiter's salary, he put those 5 through the top universities: Berkeley, UCLA, Boston U, and Harvard. Yeah, and so he's got a Catholic priest, a Catholic nun, a biochemist, a physician, and the other one, and a software engineer. Amazing that this immigrant that came to our country with nothing and was a waiter for Casa Don Diego, and the accomplishments that he and his wife had in raising their remarkable children. So they were there virtually because they're scattered all over the United States, but they were there virtually to enjoy the celebration. The really sad thing is that the manager of Casa Don Diego, the owner, was experiencing a staff shortage, so Mr. Pineda had to work as a waiter during his own party, and there was mariachis and everything, but certainly congratulations were in order for him. We'll turn to council member comments, and I'll begin with Mr. Padilla so he can finish his report.
I would just echo those congratulatory comments, Madam Mayor. That's an amazing, amazing story, and warms my heart. And with that, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cardenas.
Same for me. I actually love that place. It's awesome. It's in the heart of District 4, and also congratulations to you as well on your really well-deserved award.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. McCann?
Thank you very much. I know we didn't get to say some of the great things that we attended the last council meeting, but I want to thank PSAR for holding a shredding and electronic recycling drive on Earth Day. So happy Earth Day to them, and I very much appreciate that. I want to thank the Chula Vista Public Works for holding the Drug Take Back event. I know many times there are issues where maybe somebody will go into somebody's drug cabinet and look and see what drugs you have, and it's very, very responsible to go through your drug cabinet, make sure that you throw out all your drugs, especially if there's any type of narcotics in there that were legally distributed to you, so somebody can't go in there and maybe take them or use them. Also, with the mayor and Jill, was able to attend the Greg Cox Bike Park ribbon cutting. Exceptional event. It was great to see so many people who were enjoying riding that. And then Fire Station 3, the ribbon cutting, as you saw on the budget and the CPI, it was neat to see that the new fire station was built, although I still, it was great. And if you have any questions why it didn't become 9 and it went from 9 to 3, call my office or call the chief and we'll explain that. And then the biggest event was the Sundar Sun Outdoor RV ribbon cutting, which was a tremendous event. I was there with Jill and the mayor, and it was a great event. I know that the city manager, Maria Cachadorian, actually spent, I think, a weekend over there on a staycation, and everybody that I talked to, it exceeded their expectations. And seeing the biking trails, seeing the walking trails, it wasn't just an RV park where you had one RV next to the other. There were many things to do. I thought it was a great opportunity to be a share in nature, learn about nature, and it was a wonderful thing. And I see it being successful for years to come, and I do believe it's one of the first steps in our Bayfront Master Plan. So thank you very much.
Ms. Galvez?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, there was a lot going on this past couple of weeks. We really got out there. So first of all, I'd like to go back to an earlier item on the agenda and thank the CCDC for the $450,000 grant for renovations, improvements, and new additions to our Norman Park Senior Center.
Mm-hmm.
Fire Station 3, it was a thrill to cut a second ribbon this year, but I'm also happy that we're allocating $500,000 to rehab 21 buckets, also known as Fire Station 1.
I didn't know it was known as 21 buckets.
We started calling it 21 buckets after last year when the rains came on the new roof, and Mike and I, Councilman Rodriguez and I, toured to see how many buckets they had, capturing the rain, and there were 21. So it was wonderful seeing former Supervisor Greg Cox at the Bicycle Skills Park opening, and of course at the Sun Community San Diego bicycle path and promenade. It was a beautiful day spent there, meeting the new management of that, or the management of that facility. It was just a gorgeous day. This week I also attended a book signing by a local author called The Tales of the Tipsy Caregiver, and it was at Dulcet, which we shall be doing a ribbon opening. It's a beautiful new bakery. We've got now 3 artisan-owned bakeries on 3rd Avenue, and we shall be getting a 4th. Congratulations to Ricardo Pineda, as the mayor said, and farewell after 37 years at Casa Don Diego. I had a great, a wonderful luncheon with the Sao Cow Powwow. Have you heard of that? You haven't been? Well, it's a women's group in South County, and we did a nice Zoom, and you'll know a lot of ladies. I think I'm going to join them in future events. Maria and I attended the Peace Our Shredding event. It was very nice. They didn't have a band as they did in years past, but we won't hold that against them. Televisa opened in Seaport Village a new studio. That was fun seeing Patti Alvarez there. Ambience Hair Lounge on 3rd Avenue had a ribbon cutting, and the mayor and I attended. And also yesterday, during Police Officer Appreciation Week, I met and did a roll call with the with MTS security officers and fare inspectors, I should say, and spent the day riding the trains with them. So that was quite exciting. That's all. Thank you.
Whoa, is that all, Jill?
Yeah, right. It was busy. Like I said, it was busy.
Thanks for keeping track of everything. You know what? I'm remiss because when Mr. Lopez was here talking about universal health care and giving us that sample resolution. I would like the city council's consensus to bring that back for our review and possible adoption. So I'd like the consensus on that, if you don't mind. Okay, so, well, we've got us three here. Okay, all right. So we've got consensus to bring that back for discussion. Okay, thank you for that. And Mr. City Attorney, last but not least.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No public comments, and I think I'm going to trail item 14, probably till next week. We're still working on some additional analysis and internal discussions that will put us in a better position to brief you on that item and engage you for direction. So you will have another night off, courtesy of your local city attorney's office.
Well, thank you very much. And with that, we will adjourn to the next city council member meeting, which is scheduled for May the 25th in these council chambers. Thank you and good night.